Welcome to episode 71 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast featuring conversations in Canadian theatre with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. If you want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you like the podcast, I hope you'll consider leaving a comment or rating on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use. Ratings and comments help people find the show. My guest this week is Rosamund Small. Rosamund is a Toronto-based playwright and a member of the 2016 to 2018 Soulpepper Academy. Rosamund's Dora award-winning play Vitals has just been released in paperback, and you can find it on Amazon.ca and chapters.indigo.ca. I guess start with where I usually start with people, and that's where did you start with theater? Like, what brought you into this world?
That's hard for me because it is really a part of my the love of it, the love of theater and all sorts of performance is a childhood thing. My parents brought me to musicals, children's shows, comedy. I have a couple of really good memories of the Shaw Festival in Stratford and Noel Coward and Oscar Wilde. Like really, really, really for kids, I think they really get comedy, even if it doesn't it doesn't make sense that they would get it. Comedy that's from a different time or something. But if something's truly funny, like kids. I don't know. I loved that stuff.
Well, I mean, on that front, like, I remember watching Bugs Bunny cartoons when I was a kid. Yeah. And growing up, realizing that all that humor is way over over my head. But I still thought it was funny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you remember do you have a memory of what your earliest theater exposure was?
I don't know if I could put them in perfect chronological order. There was one very terrifying memory that I laugh about a lot now, which was my elementary school. The parents would put on a show, and my parents weren't in it, but all these other parents were, and it was Dracula, and I was in kindergarten, and it was terrifying, and I have a really strong memory of that.
Do you remember which Dracula script they were using?
Oh, I don't know. I think probably the principal of the school wrote his own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was really scary. And, I have a few memories that are not... Like, when you're really small, you tend to remember the really scary stuff. So I remember that. I remember seeing Beauty and the Beast when I was, like, maybe 3 or 4. And just crying and crying and crying. It was just too big. But they're really, like, powerful memories. Like, really, really, really powerful memories, yeah.
So you were exposed to a lot of theater quite young. When did it become a thing that you... Because some people they are exposed really young and they continue to be spectators. But do you remember when it was that you decided that you wanted to make it?
Well, should I put this dishes and stuff. I think I went through a phase of wanting to direct movies. I think I just really liked movies. I never really wanted to be an actor. I just kind of wanted to be, a bit... I have a bossy streak, so I was really... I was like director, like the boss, And then in high school, I went to Rosedale, which is a phenomenal arts high school in Toronto that doesn't... They do this great thing where you don't have to choose exactly what you're going to do and what you're going to study at 14. You can try different things. So I did dance and drama and media, and then there was a opportunity to write and direct a play, and so I was like, okay, I'll write it and then I'll get to direct it. And the writing of it was kind of very secondary, but then the next year I was like, I'll do it again. And then that second time I'd done it, I wrote it and my friend directed it, and that was way better. Like, just to focus on that script and to get that kind of hands-off sense of it's a sense of control, but also a really interesting arm's length experience to write it and not direct it. And I remember that one going up, and that one was better. That one was better than the year before, and people liked it, and that felt really good.
Did you, I mean, when you were realizing that you were figuring that you were going to let somebody else direct it, did you have, like, any kind of, did that bossy streak that you mentioned, like, resist letting somebody else control your baby, or were you, like, did you find it easier to let it go?
I'm sure that it did. Like, I remember having, like, very intense conversations with the director about the choices, right? We were in grade 11 and 12 and, like, took ourselves, you know, our work really, really, really seriously, which now seems funny, but then again, I think 5 years from now, it'll be funny that I take my own work seriously now. So yeah, I'm sure I still had really specific ideas about how things should be done, and really, really, really specific ideas about casting and stuff, but also seeing what happens when you go away and come back and a bunch of really creative people have worked is, there's a sense of, like, gratitude and kind of surprise that can be so fun. Yeah.
So you never wanted to perform your stuff. You were fine. You were, like, you really wanted to be sort of, like, either in the background, either the boss or the creator.
Oh yeah. Perform stuff. I'd be, like, under my seat in the back row. Like.
Were you always a shy person, or was it just, like, the idea of, like, being in front of people that you were shying away from?
I don't know if I never used to think of myself as a shy person. I think it's just in theater. I'm shy for a person in theater. But that's, like, you know, crazy clown for, you know, office culture or something, right? I think it depends. You know, at some dinner parties I feel like the conservative librarian in the corner, and then I have dinner with my friends from kindergarten and they're all teachers and scientists, and my life is like this bohemian fantasy, you know, like they just, you know, I'm a mile a minute to them, you know, so...
I mean, it's funny that you say that, you know, there's some, you know, all the outgoing people in theater. Most of the people that I've spoken to identify themselves as introverts, so it's like this strange thing that we imagine that all of the people in theater are completely outgoing and really just, you know, would like to be home with a book or something, like not in a crowd of people. Which is, like, crazy, because I don't know about you, like, if I go to an opening, I'm out. The show's over. I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm the whole schmooze thing. I'm not really into. Yeah.
I find that more and more as time goes by.
Was there a period where you were, like, doing the, like, sticking around after the opening and talking with people and schmoozing?
Not effectively. I mean, if that was the goal. I mean, you have friends in the world, right? So it's there's loads of people that I'm happy to talk to, but anything, I think it's like anything, it's selective. I mean, I'm in the Soulpepper Academy right now, which is 16 artists, and we're all kind of thrown together for, you know, 6 days a week, most weeks. And so when I'm there, you know, people will run up to you, hug you, kiss you on the cheek, and then, you know, say something in a goofy voice, and, like, that's just kind of the energy, because everyone's, like, in theater school, and there's a real kind of sense of you know, stir craziness and camaraderie and boredom that needs to be shown in these big gestures, you know, from such a long day, and then I go home and I'm done. You know?
No, absolutely. You know, we were talking about how I travel from a day job sometimes. You know, I'm at an event, so I'm dealing with people all the time, and then the organizer will be like, let's go out for a drink after, and I'm like, I'm just going back, and I'm just going to sleep.
Totally.
I'm done.
Fried. Yeah.
I can only take so much of that. Just to... so after this thing that you wrote in high school and let somebody else direct, was there a point where you realized that this was something you were going to do with your life?
Yeah. Really soon then, really. and I have doubted it and changed my mind and tried, thinking about other lives over and over again and still do, but absolutely. One, it was just an absolutely extraordinary feeling. Every memory I have of writing something and then having someone read it or perform it is so intense. Like, that's so intimate to me. Like, it's funny because I haven't had, my long-term relationship is with someone who's not in theater, but I so understand, and I've never experienced it, but the idea of falling in love with an actor in your play or something like that, because it's so exciting, right? It's so exciting, and when someone gets it, you're like, you get it, you get me, and it, and then when you can extrapolate that to an audience, it's so cool. I mean, I hope I never, I relearn that over and over. So that feeling, and then that was also that feeling of joy and excitement from writing and writing for theater, and then that coupled with it was really encouraged. I had drama teachers who really encouraged me. My parents really encouraged me. It's not something that I think many teenagers, it doesn't occur to you to do it, right? And I just happened to be in kind of a weird bubble.
It's because most people that I know who they're thinking about writing, so they don't think I'm going to write plays. They're like, I'm going to write my novel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go into journalism. I'm going to be the next Neil Gaiman or whatever it is they're going to be. Yeah. And most people don't think, I'm going to write plays. I'm going to be the next George Bernard Shaw or something. Yeah. Or whatever it is. Do you think it's because of that young theater background that you had from so young that your brain went towards theater more than another genre?
Yeah, there's definitely that. But I mean, you could also say I have great memories of watching movies. I have great memories of reading books. So I think it's a lot to do with the camaraderie of doing it live, and theater's so low tech. At least the stuff that I would do when I was young, and the kind of fear and nerves of the audience, all of that. Like, that's the magic of it. And I still I experiment with other forms. I've never really taken anything else never tried to take it to sort of outside of an experimental phase. But yeah, I don't know if it's about what this form is, but just the process of it. We all know, I think, when you do it, is so fun. And the danger of it, I think, is it's so fun to do that you can forget it's not really supposed to be about you. That's true. I find, anyway.
Can you? I mean, there's so many things about writing for theater that are exciting and dangerous. For me, when I'm writing for theater, it's the fact that I'm constrained. I can't write the way that you would for a movie or a novel. Yeah. There's like a finite space, a finite number of actors, and really a finite number of scene changes that I could have. There's like so many constraints, and I actually find that liberating. Are there things about theater, writing for theater, that really excite you about the form?
Yeah, I think it's so dialogue driven. That's what I love. I'm not a very visual person, really. I mean, I love beautiful things and I love visual storytelling, but it's hard for me. My brain never goes to a visual place. So theater is traditionally, not necessarily, but traditionally, the sort of 20th century Western theater, it's all about dialogue. It's about, and not necessarily, I think, not necessarily quippy things or clever things, but rhythmic things, and writing something in a way where you repeat exactly the right words so that you can catch the meaning the first time someone says it, and phrasing a sentence so that it's, you try to make it just floppy enough because the character is trying to get something across, but they're human, so they can't quite, that kind of thing. That's you can do it in film, but I think film is more visual and it's harder to focus on that.
Yeah, I know. I know people who, if they see a movie that obviously came from a play, they'll complain about it after. It's so talky. There's so much dialogue. You're just like, well, that's this thing, and they don't want so much talking, which for me is like, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I love the excitement of dialogue.
Yeah.
Do you have a process for writing, or is everything different? Is there, like, when you're starting out with a project, is there a path that project takes for you from beginning to end, or at least the writing process?
Despair, and then fear, and then, a little pep talk, and then I think I used to think I would settle on a process, and then that would be the process. And then I kind of realized that that's not quite how it's always going to be different. So generally I just start wherever I can start and go. I didn't used to plan a lot at all. I'm writing something right now that, because it's an adaptation, that's almost like a plan, because at least you're planning to stick to the thing you're adapting.
Yeah.
But I know some people are so methodical about it, 1-page outline, 10-page treatment, breakdown, but I've never, ever stuck to that. I don't think I've ever gotten past the first outline.
I've tried it.
Have you? Yeah.
I've been wholly unsuccessful with it every time I've tried it.
Yeah, it's hard, eh?
I know people that works so well for them. And as soon as I start to do that, I feel like something tugging. It's like, I don't know if it's like the character or the idea that's just like trying to be more than just what's on the paper.
Yeah.
I end up just having to let it go and be whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And fix it later.
Totally. Yeah. So much fixing. Yeah.
Well, that was like one of the, I spent like so many years hating everything I wrote because it wasn't perfect on the first draft. So I'd be like, this is garbage. And it took me so long to learn that that's the point of the first draft. And you make it better subsequently. Yeah. And that was a hard one to learn. Did you have did you figure something like that out early on, or did that take a long time to figure out?
I'm so hesitant to ever say like, oh, well, I figured this out, because I know that the next time I'm faced with something that's not what I want it to be, I will spiral into, I find myself sometimes like 2:00 in the morning, I've tried to write something or I've reread something I thought was great from yesterday and it's awful. And I'm like online looking at things like, like, oh, well, I could move to Poland, like it looks, that's what a different life that would be. Like, it just like, I don't know. I've certainly been defeated and come back enough that I don't feel the same level of despair. But I've also abandoned projects and not been sure if that was the right decision, but I just did.
I think we've all done that. Anybody who writes has done that.
Yeah.
And then you come back to it later and it's like, it's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elizabeth Gilbert tells a story about like this novel that she was going to write after Eat, Pray, Love. And she sort of like started it and then gave it up. And then she went back to write it and it just wasn't there. But it turns out that she met another writer who was basically writing that novel. It's like the idea went from her to somebody else. But it was like you have this finite period of time when the idea is flowing, and if you miss that window by giving up on it, it's hard to get it back again.
Yeah, there is something in an impulse, right? Like something's getting at your, unless it's something that you're trying to crank out, like, okay, it's a commission, I better get excited about something, which eventually you want to get to that place where it's just as exciting. But the stuff you come up with on your own, there is something. And okay, what was the first thing that made me want to write this? And that's helped me a couple times of, they're really simple things. They're not deep ideas, but my show Vitals, which is about a paramedic, every once in a while just being like, okay, why did I want to write this show about a paramedic? It's because that's a hell of a job, like they're really like really, really simple, shallow things. But, when I didn't know how to end the show, it would be like, the paramedic doesn't need to get hit, get pregnant or get cancer or, because that's not what the play's about. What a hell of a job, that kind of thing.
The idea of like letting it end in the way that it finally did, not like with a pregnancy or cancer or whatever, did you feel initially like you had to do something like that to end it, and eventually decide that it could just end?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. I mean, it's a few years ago now, but I definitely remember with that play specifically, because it's a one-woman show and it's about all these traumas, kind of this desperation to end my first draft. First of all, was like, because it was so amazing that the director and producer of it had said, I want to direct this, I want to produce this before I'd finished my first draft. And that's like, yes! And then immediately it was like, oh my God! I gotta get an ending, you know? Yeah. And bless him that he didn't read any of them and change his mind, you know? Because he could have. But yeah, the need to... every writer knows this, but I think especially in a one-person show, the sort of weird need to top itself... it's really tempting to go to cliche places. Well, because cliches are appealing for a reason, right? Like, a pregnancy is not interesting. It's just nothing to do with what the play was about. Yeah. And so that's why it's a go-to. But of course, a pregnancy is incredibly interesting if it's from a play about that.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, loads of, not even drafts that I wrote, but just ideas about something painful needs to happen and therefore it will be fascinating. And that's a really tempting trope. And I say that, it's funny, it's ironic that I'm saying this because of course the ending of Vitals is very painful. It's full of pain. So it's not as though I found some great light twist and turn, you know.
I mean, it's a play about a paramedic. There's probably going to be some heavy stuff in there. I'm curious about, a lot of people go to the point, they go and they write a one-person show so that they can perform it. As somebody who's not a performer, what was the draw of the one-person show for you?
For Vitals, which I'd never written one before that, and I haven't revisited the form really since. I just started writing this voice, and I had met this woman who was a medic, and I'd read about medics. No other character presented themselves. And I think in the end that plays about loneliness. And I mean, what an automatic metaphor for loneliness, right? Yeah. To be the only character in the play. Yeah. And you know pretty quickly into the story that it's a one-woman show, which is in a way static, which can be really dangerous for those shows, but also you know that no one else is going to come and help her, right? There's nobody else in the show. So there's a meta-theatrical element of her being absolutely alone. And so that show really needed to be only her, right? It wouldn't be right to have somebody else in it. Because there's nobody else in her life. And I was given a one-person show as an assignment to write for myself, and I wrote something for me to perform at Soulpepper, and that was really hard because I was writing for me to be me in the show, and it was much more of a, much more of an exercise in solo show. But Vitals is more like just a play that doesn't happen to have anybody else in it, you know?
Yeah. When you were given the assignment to write for yourself, was the assignment to write in your voice? Like, not as a character, just to be very honest about something that happened to you? Was it, like, supposed to be autobiographical?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've written autobiographical stuff, but you would have to, like, dig so deep through the layers of it to find the autobiographical stuff, and people who know me can find it. Right. But I've never really, the idea of, like, being like, this is what happened to me, just sort of, like, there's something that just makes me just sort of hits me in a very uncomfortable spot as a performer.
Well, it's that thing of, it's you talking about yourself. Yeah. And, like, of course we'd love to talk about ourselves, but not too much and not right now and not to you, you know, like, or like, I love to talk about myself, but only to someone I know will validate me back, and an audience, maybe, maybe not. Yeah.
It's so terrifying. Who were you performing that for? Like, other members of the Academy, or did you perform it for, like, the public?
No, it was closed. So there's probably maybe 60 people, but sort of invite based, basically. So a very friendly crowd. But still, just I lost my mind. Like the week before, I was just like, I remember my wonderful mentor there stopped me in the middle of a kind of run through. I can't remember what he was going to say, but it just threw me so much. And it was really nice. Like he was helping me. He was being sort of an outside eye director presence. And I was like, I can't fucking start again. Like I just like, and I didn't, have a tantrum, but it was, I don't have tantrums, I'm not a, but that part of you that's like, can't you see that I'm absolutely in crisis trying to read my 20-minute play? Like it's ridiculous. Yeah.
How was it performing that?
It was actually great.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but my nerves really disappeared about the day before.
Oh, the day before. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's weird, eh?
I performed my first solo show this past summer in Hamilton, and I was fine up until the day of.
Yeah.
And that's the day I was like, this is the day I vomit. This is the day I just, vomit everywhere before I do this thing.
Did you convince yourself you were dying?
I didn't convince myself I was dying, but I thought that... I remember crossing the street thinking, if a bus hit me right now, it might be better than doing my show. It was just like, so terrifying.
You're like, well, they can't make me if I'm like if I need to go to the hospital, then too bad. Money back. Like it's it's so your nerves went away the day before, and you were able to perform it, and not being a performer, how did somebody who purposefully did not want to be an actor, how was it having to perform that? I mean, when I say acting, kind of off the cuff, what I generally mean is disappearing into text, right? Mm-hmm. What I mean is a kind of, as I said about dialogue, sort of 20th century Western idea of you're going to be on stage and pretend that I'm not here and have this conversation as though it's really happening. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't what I was doing. Okay. I was, up there by myself, kind of doing a bit of a clownish kind of, not clown, but a bit of a, I'm going to be really, 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 really serious and tell you this really, really, really funny story. Mm-hmm. And all the house lights were up, and I just kind of looked and did all this eye contact with the audience. And that is really it is performance, but it's so not disappearing into text. It's almost like I felt like I was standing up there challenging people it was almost like challenging people to look away. Like, you can't look away from this situation because I'm looking right at you.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you do that to somebody who's in theater. Yeah. Because they won't look away. Right. They feel like they have to give you something back. You look at if you do that to somebody who's not in theater, they will immediately be like, lighting grid. Yeah. But it's interesting because I've found through doing my own piece that the only way for me to do that was to treat the audience as my scene partner. That I needed them there. Yeah. Which is a fun thing to explore. Yeah. What is there something that you learned in through this exercise that you can think of?
It's funny to learn. The nerves disappearing was interesting because I was so nervous. I was truly nervous. And then I think something inside me was like, oh, it's almost over. Right? And then suddenly I was like, oh, I'll probably still be alive after that. It's some animalistic part of you is so afraid. There's that. And then there was also in rehearsal, I rehearsed it I didn't have a director, but I had a designer and I had a mentor. And in rehearsal with them, I was doing it sort of laughing at myself while I was doing it. And then, because they're just funny, and it's not a deeply confessional piece. It's not extremely serious. It's a lot of silly anecdotes about being a kid and playing dress up and being disappointed, that kind of thing. But then as soon as I got in front of people, I just was like, oh, that's not going to work. And I had to be I suddenly took my own stories much more seriously. Like something
that happened when you showed it to your mentor and the designer?
No, so when I was doing it in rehearsal, I was laughing off the things I was saying. I was laughing with them. And as soon as I was in front of 60 people, they were laughing, and I was like, oh no, I need to really, really take this really seriously. And so it was quite a different performance than I'd rehearsed, where I didn't laugh at my own jokes at all. And the audience laughed much more than my rehearsal audience. So something about that group of people, it was more, it was more akin to stand-up. And I know some stand-ups laugh at their own jokes, but mostly in stand-up, they take the anecdotes they're telling very, very seriously. And that's what's funny.
Yeah.
And that just kind of happened on stage in that moment. So, it's just funny to experience that. Yeah.
It's the Buster Keaton effect, too. Because, whenever everybody calls him the stone face, but he would smile. But it was always funnier when he didn't.
Yeah.
If he didn't have an expression on his face and was very serious, it was always funnier than when he smiled or laughed.
Yeah. What is that, eh? That's so funny.
I don't know what it is, but there's something, I think it might be rooted in Schadenfreude, like that whole idea that if it's happening to you, I feel better, sort of thing. And if they don't react like it's funny, then I think we feel it a little bit more.
Yeah,
it might be something like that.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to jump back just for a second about the writing. Did you? From high school, did you study playwriting somewhere? Did you go to a theater school or writing course anywhere?
Yeah, I did a year at the University of Guelph and took a class with Judith Thompson, and then I transferred to University of Toronto and I did a couple of years of class with Janet Sears. Both amazing writers and just incredible, smart, interesting women. And Janet particularly stayed and for years, just out of the goodness of her heart, read drafts and helped me with stuff. And she did this incredible thing that I don't think you're allowed to do anymore, where I think she called it an independent study, and I just kind of show her drafts of a play, and then she gave me like a 98%, and that was one of my fourth-year courses, which is probably the only reason I ended up with a decent average. But yeah, I did. I took some of those formal classes, but a lot of structural things, sort of more. Those classes were very free and very, especially when the teachers trust you. Generally, they're quite free. So a lot about authenticity and honesty and just thinking about what the play's about. And then now I'm in this program at Soulpepper, which is sort of a combination of school and work. And that has been great because there's access to a lot of structure, which I do understand why people resist traditional structure, but I think learning it can help you. It can help you learning a 3-act structure, learning, we took an adaptation master class and learn just things that you're doing without realizing it anyway, about twists and turns and 3 acts and that kind of thing.
So it's previous stuff has not been focused on structure, and Soulpepper has given you sort of the grounding?
Yeah. I mean, it's not all they do, but it's just been something that I've never had before that is available. There's Guillermo Verdecchia, who's the mentor that I've mentioned before. He's just so perceptive about just events and order and action and that kind of thing. He's so clued into those things and also clued into different ways of doing it. So he understands, for example, that a 3-act structure in a screenplay is just one kind of structure, and there's a different kind of structure from a different culture and a different kind of structure from a different century. And so having access to that perspective is awesome and been very new for me.
How did you find yourself when you were working with the structures resistant to it? Because it can be difficult, like when you're forced to do something new that's unfamiliar, it can be difficult to like just sort of go with it.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself pushing against it?
I haven't been given assignments that have to stick exactly to anything. It's more just the resources. like taking, you know, a couple of classes on adaptation from someone who's done 10 adaptations. Michael O'Brien was his name.
Right.
And just having access to what he does. So I haven't been, no one's forced me to do anything in any particular way, but it actually felt so freeing to have someone say, you know, this is so about a third of the way through, there's a big twist and turn, and then by halfway through, you can't turn back, and you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And has that been like new for you to have people like suggesting these sorts of things?
Yeah. It's funny. It's not been a part of that formality has not been a part of the way I've worked before. I've had tons of notes and tons of dramaturgy, but just that particular thing that is so common in film, I don't think is so enforced in theater, and I think that's really great. But it's been cool to learn it at least. Yeah.
It's interesting to think of. I've read it a lot in, like, you know, during every so often I'll be like, I must read all of the writing books I can.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really my way of not writing, but like feeling like I'm doing something. So I go out and I'll buy like all of the writing books, and I'll read all the writing books, and I feel like I'm productive. Right. And then, but I'll once I start to try to put like the 3-act structure that's being talked about into practice, I'm always like, I can't. I do like this little tantrum internally.
It sounds so easy, but it's so hard. I feel like reading a screenplay book, people must think they can write a screenplay, and then they don't. But if you try, you realize it's so much harder than it sounds in the book.
Well, the book always makes it sound easy. That's why they're selling the book.
Yeah, you know? Exactly. Yeah,
that's why people buy it.
Yeah,
or like Saving the Cat or whatever, Save the Cat.
Right.
Which is a book that everybody always recommends, and I've never purchased because I feel like it's just another one of those books that's going to make it sound like it's really easy to write a screenplay, and it's not easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you've gone a step ahead of me because I don't think I've ever finished one. They're on my bookshelf.
Oh, I mean, there's a bunch I haven't finished because eventually I say, you know, it's just an excuse not to do this stuff.
Totally. Yeah.
In terms of when you joined the Soulpepper Academy, was there something that you were hoping to get out of the experience?
I feel like I've mentioned a lot of it. It was a lot of interest in adaptation. That's huge, and a lot of what they do, because they do have this mandate to be somewhat grounded in a classical canon. So when they do new work, it's often. I think Albert Schultz explained it to us once. His way of looking at it is you look at what's come before and then you look forward with that knowledge, which is such a beautiful way of thinking of it. So they really have this. They're interested in being in dialogue with the Western canon. So the Greeks and Shakespeare and all the way through to the 20th century, they're interested in finding new ways to be connected with those works and connected with other other forms of literature and art and politics. So I just saw their production of Human Bondage, which I think is so amazing. And that's a very, very new adaptation, staged in this incredible way with the ensemble making all the sounds and the shapes of the story. But it's actually a 19th century British novel, right? So learning that kind of work was of interest to me. But also a huge departure for me because I've done and so happy to continue also to do really new work, really, really contemporary work, really out of nothing original stuff and immersive stuff and site-specific stuff. It wasn't out of a wish to stop doing that, but just kind of to expand the arsenal as much as possible. Yeah.
Was Vitals was originally a site-specific?
Yeah.
Was that your initial intent to do it site-specific, or did it become that?
It was always going to be site-specific, I think, but I hadn't thought a lot about what that meant. I'd seen a play called Mr. Marmalade, which is an American play, but Outside the March, which is a company I've worked with a lot, did a production of it that Mitchell Cushman directed, and it was so awesome. Oh my God. When you think of a show that you just loved, I think of it and I just kind of get really excited because it was just so cool. It was set in a kindergarten classroom, and the audience was kind of following the characters through this kindergarten classroom, and everything sort of weirdly miniature, and it was so eerie and beautiful. and I think just seeing that show, I think it was my first site-specific show, made me want to do something like that. And then because the show was about a paramedic and it was so contemporary and so Toronto, it felt really natural that it be out and about, kind of.
Yeah.
The very first drafts of the script would say this play can be anywhere, but it needs to be in Toronto outside, or it needs to be something like that, or in a big city, you know, somewhere. And I think my original idea was it's going to be so low key, it's going to be a one-person show that you can do anywhere. Like, we can do it in a house, we can do it in a bank, we can do it in a cafe. Which is really ironic because it did become a site-specific show, but a very non-portable, like, expensive, difficult, very specific to one location show.
Right.
With, like, you know, 12 other people kind of doing silent stuff around, and an ambulance and a dog, and, like, I don't know, it felt like a helicopter, and, you know, like, it felt, I mean, to me, it felt like being, like, on Broadway or something.
Yeah. It was read as part of the Playmate podcast. And, you know, speaking earlier as we were about how, you know, theater is so dialogue specific, to take a play that was so site specific.
Yeah.
And have it produced with basically just the audio, was that very different, or did it feel like it was sort of the right way to hear it?
Well, Mitchell Cushman, who directed Vitals, his kind of magical brain came up with this whole site-specific concept for it. But part of that concept was actually that the audience hear the character the whole time, but not necessarily see her. So in the original production, audience members had earphones, and as they walked around, they had live broadcast from the main character. So they saw her speaking, and then she would disappear into the house, and you would explore without her, but you would hear her talking in your ear.
Okay.
So actually we had almost an element of something similar to a podcast really incorporated into the show. So I think, I mean, he picked up on that auditory nature of it really quickly. And the show has, you know, it has no stage directions. So it's very, very, very auditory. So I think it makes a lot of sense as a podcast, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you listen to it?
I did, yeah.
How was it? Like, listening to it, as the author listening to it, how was it?
I liked it. I listened to it while I was walking around. I think, well, you know, walking to the grocery store and walking back, and a cool thing happened where you hear ambulances all the time and you don't notice, and then you know, that kind of thing. So I had a couple of things from the outside world interrupted in a really cool kind of coincidental way. Yeah, and it was a bit of just a blast from the past because Catherine, who originated the role, read it, and
it
was nice. Yeah, it had been a couple of years since I'd looked at it, really, so it was cool.
Are you, once you're done with a play, do you feel like you're done, you don't need to touch it anymore, or have you ever gone back and, like, tinkered with it?
I mean, I want to tinker with it, but I'm also, you know, Vitals, I felt done. You know, I mean, it was produced and published, and then it was this podcast, and we're having a little party for the publication coming up, but it feels, I don't think you you abandon it, right? I mean, it's not done because it's perfect, but it's done because it's time to be done, you know? Yeah.
I've had this thing where occasionally I can't let it go, so I go back and I revise.
Oh, I know.
Because I can.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing that has said you're done now.
Yeah.
Do you have if something's getting produced, you have like it must be done by this time, but if you don't have like that date, do you find that you can just like tinker and tinker and tinker until you're tired of it, or? Oh, like if it's not being produced?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm so not motivated if there's no production, honestly. Like, there's nothing in a drawer. You know what I mean? There's no, like, brilliant thing waiting for someone to be interested. So much of it is about, well, it's got to get better because people are going to see it, you know?
Right, yeah.
That and the motivation of the collaborators, right? I had Mitchell next to me, you know, reading drafts and this and that and asking questions, and then we did that again with our show TomorrowLove, which was even way more writing, like hours and hours and hours of writing, and both of those, I think if he hadn't been there, I wouldn't have. Not only would his really, really, really insightful ideas not have not have made their way in and his questions not have been answered. But also, I just don't know if I would have finished it. I mean, you need someone who's expecting it.
Yeah. In those cases, you've had the idea, and have you presented it to, say, Mitchell, and he said, yes, we're going to do that? Or have you, have you written, a draft and shown it to him? Or, what's the process of those productions like?
Vitals, I was well on my way before we started working on it, but he still had so much, his kind of dramaturgical eye was so all over it. TomorrowLove was more collaborative. I wrote, it's 15 short plays, TomorrowLove, right? So I'd write, I can't even remember, I honestly can't remember. I think I wanted to do short plays about sexuality because I was doing my degree in sexuality studies, and then I did some that were more about technology, and sort of through trial and error I kept writing short plays, and he'd be like, this one and this one are great, and the ones with only 2 people seem cool, and then eventually we ended up with 15 2-person plays, 15 minutes to 45 minutes, all about broadly, love, sex, technology in the future. So they all sort of incorporated those ideas somehow. So that was much more both of us, and much more, because it's a big project and it's really more than one play. It's 15. Yeah. So that was much more sort of bouncing back and forth about what it was, Yeah.
Yeah. The short play is one of those, I want to say much maligned, because it's there's so many 10-minute, I see calls for it's a 10-minute play festival.
I know.
Or whatever. It's and I keep wondering, so I keep writing this 10-minute play, and then you're going to do it, and then we're going to what?
Right,
you're going to do this staged reading of it, and then we're going to what with the short play? So I mean, it's so hard to figure out what you're going to do with a short play.
Yeah.
But it's good that you found this way to combine them into a production.
Yeah.
Which might be the way to work out that whole I have these short plays problem.
Yeah, I've never been to one of these 10-minute play festivals, but it's a real thing. People seem to really want, but 10 minutes is, the TomorrowLove plays are short, but they're not. None of them are 9 minutes. You know what I mean?
I have so much trouble wrapping my head around how I'm supposed to introduce an idea, work on the idea, and have some character development, resolve it in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
which seems like an impossible task.
And I love short stories, but not a lot of them are 5 pages. And 10 minutes of dialogue is really 5 pages, right? So, it's kind of it's a funny thing. Yeah. I don't know.
But there's so much, I see so many of those, on the playwriting forums or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just 10-minute plays. And I'm I have none. I can't give you a 10-minute play.
Right, yeah.
I don't quite know where that comes from. Because I don't know in what situation, when did this whole 10-minute play thing start?
Yeah, it's always 10 minutes. It's never 12 minutes. Yeah.
Not 15. It's just 10.
Yeah. But they must be fun to go to. I can imagine really enjoying a 10-minute play festival, I
guess the advantage with it's sort of like Fringe is if you're at that 60-minute show. If it's not great, it's not that long.
Yeah.
If this one's not great, in 9 more minutes, it's going to be a better thing.
Yeah.
Or another thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Is there? How long? The Soulpepper Academy is 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how far into it are you? 1 year?
No, maybe a third. Almost a third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And aside from the things that you're doing with Soulpepper, are you working on something? Is there something coming up for you, or?
No. We just closed TomorrowLove. It feels like forever ago just because it was such an intense thing. But it closed December 18th. So, and then I'm right into, the academy's 12 hours a day, right? So it's, when I'm doing my job well, when I'm writing properly, when I'm writing there, the way it's the most beneficial to me is if I stay at my desk and stay and work at night or work in the morning. They're not slave drivers, but that's the way to get the most out of it, I think.
Yeah.
So trying to really commit to those projects that you get to do there. They're not just practice. They're practice in the best sense. They are I don't know if this seems kind of pretentious, but they're the practice of it, right? So I'm completely in there and really making that the world and it's kind of great. I'm writing a short musical with James Smith, who's a composer in the program, and that's it. That's my whole world. That's my whole day. And it's great.
Is musical something you ever thought about writing before?
Yes. I love them, and people always look at me like they're surprised because they think playwrights should be above them or something. My best friend in the whole world is Britta Johnson, who's I think about to become quite ridiculously famous. And she wrote a musical called Life After that's coming up next year at Canadian Stage, and I don't know if it's I mean, I always did love musicals, and I see the silliness of them, like I see why people make fun of them, but it depends on the musical and it depends how open you're willing to be with them, I think. But the good ones,
I definitely see what you're saying, and I think when people are thinking about the silliness of the musical, I think they're thinking of like the Noel Coward era, when it was just like, this scene exists to get to this song.
Sure, yeah.
It's like so like it's so contrived and the songs are so empty and silly.
Yeah.
That it just seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they're not seeing like a Sweeney Todd or a Hamilton or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it can be this like.
Oh, that's right, Hamilton. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking people think they're silly because it's clearly it's back, right?
But, it's like the funny thing is that Hamilton was like last year, and this year the show that the Broadway people are talking about is Dear Evan Hansen, which is a more traditional show.
Right.
It's more dialogue and some songs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's but I mean Hamilton is still Hamilton, but it's like last year. But I think. Outside of Hamilton, because people, I know people who are like, I don't do musicals, but Hamilton, like other stuff, trying to convince people of the value and the entertainment value of musicals that are not that play can be a challenge sometimes.
I know they're so. I mean, what could be more phenomenal than people using music to express a story? I mean, it seems so natural to me. It seems as natural as design. It seems. Yeah. I mean, I love dialogue-driven plays, but when they go wrong, I don't know. They're not. Music is beautiful, right? It's so beautiful, and why shouldn't it be beautiful? And
there's a certain. I think in some ways, musicals allow us to be like Shakespearean. In like the breadth of emotion and things like that in a way that sometimes straight up dialogue doesn't quote unquote allow us anymore. And the music can underscore things that the dialogue, just straight up dialogue play can't.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are you writing lyrics or just the book?
No, it doesn't. It's not. I don't think we have a lot of real songs in it. It's more. It's more like I'm writing a weird play, like a very weird play, and then James is. We're still just working on it, so we're figuring out what kind of musical it is as we go, which is cool.
Yeah.
But he's done things like take a line of dialogue and find the rhythm of the line of dialogue. So I can't remember the example he gave, but if the line is, he wondered if he was a good man. It's like the rhythm is do 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 do. Do, 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 do. And he's writing music like that, like with that rhythm, which is inspired a bit by London Road, which is this amazing verbatim musical.
He did that at Canadian Stage a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think we're still figuring out if there's going to be a lot of lyrics. There might be some, but it's more integrated than that. Like we're working more together than that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool.
And I mean, it sounds like you've got this really close working relationship with the composer in a way that I think it must be kind of ideal for like working on this sort of thing.
I think a close working relationship is always the ideal. I mean, my collaborative work with Mitchell Cushman on our immersive shows, where he's the director, but it's really our show. You know, it's you know, Mitchell and Roz presents. You know, like until we're in rehearsal, and then there's the actors, the stage manager. I mean, everyone's on the team. But in terms of the planning, it's not my script that I hand over and then it's his turn. It's our show, and then and I do feel that a mirroring of that excitement and that partnership with James, and that's I think more and more what I look for. I find that well. I know some people love a big ensemble and they want to devise stuff with 12 people. I really find like one person's good, you know.
I think I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, and you, one of the things you mentioned earlier was, like, with theater, there's all the people. Like, it's, like, more collaborative than some other forms of writing. So, like, having somebody to work with is, like, one of the joys of creating theater. It's not like a screenwriter alone writing it, who then gives it to the studio, gives it to a director who makes all their changes that they want, and then it's done and that writer is gone. It's the playwright is a little more integrated than that, which is great. I mean, it's all I know, really. It's my only experience, but I think that's what keeps, at least I think it keeps me sane. You know, that there's there's two of us on this boat, you know. It can be a little, you know, one person can fish the other one out of the water or something.
Exactly. Exactly.
Are you on social media?
A little bit, I'm not super active, but a little bit, Can
I ask you Twitter handle?
Sure, it's @small Rosamund.
And do you have a website or anything?
I don't have a website. I have Facebook.
Okay.
And people can message me if they want. Say hi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, thank you. It's been delightful.